Welcome back to 3D Dialogue. Shamanism is a spiritual practice that some historians say has existed for over 40,000 years and is known as the oldest healing tradition in the world. Historically, the shaman was someone who acted as a medium between the physical and the spiritual worlds through various rituals. Today, this tradition is observed as a way for one to return to his or her roots through their natural surroundings. Joining me in studio to tell us more about the practice of shamanism is Martha Lucier, the co-founder of Northern Edge Algonquin Retreat Center. Thanks very much for coming in.
Well, thank you.
Perhaps we could start with the question, what is shamanism?
Well, you touched on it very, very well. Shamanism is a spiritual practice that dates back 40,000 years and is a practice that was on every continent in the world. So every one of our ancestors at one time or another practiced shamanism. It is not a religion because shamanism is a spiritual practice in that there is no leader and there are no rules. So a religion has a leader and has rules. So therefore it's a spiritual practice. It's a personal spiritual practice. And what basically shamanism, the word shamanism comes, it's a Tungus word that comes from northern Siberia, which means a shaman is someone who travels to non-ordinary reality to obtain information on behalf of themselves, on behalf of the community, or to obtain healing on behalf of themselves, a community member, or the community. It is something that is very much, the reason why it still exists today is because of its nature to shift with the changing times and to adapt itself to the people's needs.
Always evolving to reflect the culture of the day.
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned that the practice of shamanism is very personal. Perhaps, for the benefit of our audience, you could give us an example of a practice of shamanism or an example of someone, how literally they would practice.
Well, the first step in my experience with shamanism was learning the shamanic journey, which is the commonality amongst all people practicing shamanism.
And what do you mean by the shamanistic journey?
What I mean by that is in different cultures, depending on where one resides, one might use a drum or a rattle or a didgeridoo or other percussion instrument, or in some cultures they use herbs such as ayahuasca or peyote to go into an altered state of consciousness. And the drum itself is called the shaman's horse. It is what carries us into non-ordinary reality. The sound of the drum actually changes our brain waves into a more theta state, where we're more receptive to what we call the spirits, where we're more connected with the Creator in the invisible worlds, with our imagination. And so what happens is an individual who practices shamanism will use a drum to go into that state of consciousness. And then once one begins a practice, they'll have a common entry point. And we journey to the upper or to the lower or to the middle worlds. It's common to access the upper worlds like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz did by going up over a rainbow, up a funnel cloud. Or you can access the upper world by going up a mountaintop or flying up on eagle's wings. Something that brings you up, way up high. Accessing the lower world, we can do that like Alice in Wonderland did, falling down a hole into the earth, or going through a crack in a rock or a whirlpool in a lake that brings us down deep into the earth. And also shamans would travel in the middle world. We can travel in the middle world to find lost objects. An example of why a shaman would travel in the middle world in traditional societies was for the hunters. The shaman would travel to find where the buffalo were roaming, or the deer, or the antelope, and then come back from their journey in their imagination and draw the picture that they saw, the map of where the buffalo or deer were. And in that process then give that to the hunters who would then hunt down. And so it was a means of survival shamanism as a means of survival.
Mm-hmm.
If the shaman was not good at what they did, the community would not survive.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to really develop their skills.
And playing almost a leadership role within the community.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Could you perhaps tell us a bit more about the classes that you teach in terms of shamanism?
What I teach is I teach basic introductory shamanic retreats where people learn how to journey. They learn how to journey in the upper, the lower, and the middle world.
Mm-hmm.
They learn how to come up with questions that are pertinent. That is one of the other things that's really, really important in journeying, is being able to come up with a very clear question or intention for the journey. And they also...
So that it's guided rather than random?
Well, that's... When we go on a journey, it's like picking up a telephone, and we want to be able to speak or have a reason.
The right number.
Yeah, and have a reason for our call. If we don't have a reason for calling, then we can be very scattered and go all and waste our time, really. But if we have a real clear intention of why we're going on the journey, that helps direct where we go with our journey.
Like a focus.
Exactly. So along with the focus as well as the drum beat is what propels us. So on a basic shamanism retreat, one will be become very, very skilled at journeying, because we'll be journeying.
Like a navigational skill.
Exactly. And the intention is that once they return back to their home, they'll be able to do this. And the other real important thing is that those journeying have a real connection with their spiritual allies. So we might have a power animal, such as a wolf or a whale or a tree spirit or a rock spirit or a human teacher in that realm, or another spiritual ally that leads us and guides us in that non-ordinary reality place and protects us and helps us to come back to ordinary reality.
Such as like Nanapush within the Aboriginal, or the coyote within the Aboriginal tradition.
Right.
It's very interesting. We'll have to break for a moment. We're speaking to Martha Lucier, co-founder of the Northern Edge Algonquin Retreat Center, about the practice of shamanism. We'll be right back after this short break. You're watching 3D Dialogue.